What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are down in sunny Bradenton, Florida, and we're going to show you guys one of the newest additions to the Dr.TuneEmAll YouTube channel, Pick Up Some Parts. So let's head on inside. All right, guys, we have made it down to TBM Brakes. I've never been here before, but we got to do a little exchanging on some parts.
Yes, sir.
And
have a little lunch.
Got me a bratwurst, and take a tour of the place. Awesome. Show us around a little bit.
Come on in, man. So I'm Jason. I'm Director of Operations here. I've been with the company 17 years, so it's been a bit of my child as I've grown up, and I'm excited that, as you can see here, as of 3 weeks ago, we are finally machining parts in our facility. So
yeah, and you came from California.
Southern California, yeah. So that's where the company started about 30 years ago.
How do you feel about Florida?
I like it, man. Everyone said I was going to die, the humidity was going to kill me, but I'm still here.
It probably feels very similar, yeah.
it feels good. It's fun. So we've got 3 CNC machines here and a saw. We can bring in raw material, cut it to spec, and then start milling and lathing away.
So I noticed this bandsaw.
Yep.
And how thick that aluminum was and how fast it actually cuts it. So that thing's automated, does it all by itself?
You just go program whatever lengths you want. You can have a dozen different lengths, and you just feed a bar into it, and it'll spit out what you're looking for. And it's cutting that right now at about, I think, 3 minutes a pop. So.
All right, and so what you're cutting now is actually rotor hats.
Yeah, so these are going to be our standard rear drag race hats for your typical semi-floater, 9-inch steel. We offer them in 2 different depths, and both those depths offer 3 different rotor mounting patterns, and then 3 different wheel patterns as well. So we'll cut the material here.
You can see how thick that is. So that's it being cut on the machine. We'll jump over and show you after it's cut. So these are
slugs here, and then from here they'll go into the mill, and we'll run first operation on them.
A lot of aluminum in there.
And then the last step is we'll put them in the lathe, and that'll do the finishing of the OD and just clean everything up. And then now you've got our standard rear hat, which, like I said, we've got slots for 5 on 4.5 and 5 on 4 3/4, both 1/2-inch and 5/8 studs, and then 5 on 5 5/8 studs.
Very universal.
And then you can mount the rotor in 3 different locations depending on the axle offset. And then our rotors have a step in it, so you can flip the rotor around, so you can actually have 6 different formations.
Okay.
With one single.
Yeah, very universal. And then after that process there, they head out, which those are going to now get nickel plated for that TBM look. Everybody knows.
Everything's nickel plated. And then you come on over here, this is where we assemble all of our brake calipers. Every single brake caliper, after it's assembled, gets put on this test rig. And so we soak test it to make sure there's no leaking, and then we also check to make sure the pistons are retracting properly.
Okay.
So we'll go from assembly in here. Get a complete caliper. This will get mounted up on here. We'll run this for an hour at about 1200 PSI. They'll stay there, and we're basically getting soak test, and then after that we'll go off and on, and make sure everything's retracting properly.
So give these people an idea of why TBM has its staple for the zero drag and all that stuff.
It all comes down to the brake caliper. We pride ourselves in delivering an extremely rigid brake caliper. What we do is we start with an inner and outer 26-18 forged aluminum half, so the same material you're forging pistons out of. So as it starts to see some temperature, it's actually gaining some strength. And then instead of just bolting those 2 halves together, we put these steel center bridges that are 4140 heat treated bridges, right, acting like a wishbone, keeping that caliper extremely rigid. And then they're fastened both above and below where the clamping force is being achieved. So now when you're adding a whole bunch of line pressure to the caliper, it's not deflecting material, it's being utilized for clamping force. And because the caliper is not deflecting, when you get off the brakes, the O-ring's able to do its job and pull the piston back. The problem is if you have a caliper that's deflecting, that O-ring can't combat that, and the piston's never pulled back forward. So it all comes down to, there's nothing internally tricky, something in there, pulling pads back. It all comes from having an extremely rigid caliper.
The strength.
Yep.
So they not only work really well, they're really strong, and I think they look better than any brake on the market. So
I think so too. And then from there we go down into shipping, where as of the last couple weeks, we're basically shipping every popular brake kit within 1 to 2 days. So
nice. Yeah, mine came immediately.
Yeah, so it's something kind of unheard of right now in just motorsports in general.
Yeah, you're pretty much waiting for anything you order at the moment. Yeah.
we were the same way 5 or 6 months ago.
Yeah,
Really,
but being able to bring everything in-house, being able to manufacture your own stuff, and have everything in one building, you can make that happen. Cool.
Here we've got our hubs where we have about 8 different variations depending on what spindle pin and spindle you're running.
Yeah, so Moonshine, we're going to use a spindle mount wheel, but on the truck, we're actually going to use like a hub style, which is better for street use versus purely drag racing.
Correct.
Which one am I doing with that?
Yeah, with a spindle mount wheel, you're tending to go with a drag-only application. It's really not going to see much side load.
Yeah.
But on a street-driven vehicle and stuff, we really recommend
This is what you
like a
want.
power. Yeah.
So we'll probably use a strut on the truck, but we're going to have a different style hub on it, so we can do some drag and drive stuff with that is the plan. So not only do you guys do drag brakes, but you guys do all kinds of different style brakes for different kind of motorsports applications.
Yeah. Well, we're famous from that flower-looking rotor,
right?
And that's something we did 30 years ago for the sprint car world, and we brought that into different markets. But that is not the end-all, be-all in a rotor. You know, if you're road racing and you need a big vented rotor that's going to dissipate heat at a quicker rate, we do offer those, and we have cast iron rotors here that go through a week-long thermal process of heat treatment and cryo treatment to help stabilize the material. And
what are those big boys for?
we'll do, you can have an SM95 Mustang big brake kit. They'll run 13, 14-inch rotors. Really any platform that's in the drag race world, when you put that on a road course, it's a totally
different animal. Yeah. How did you guys actually get started? Was it in drag racing or?
We, about in the early 90s, Warren, the founder of the company, took to like the sprint car world, because they were actually oddly enough taking really thin steel drag race rotors and putting them on the inboard of a sprint car because they were lightweight. And then they were warping and deforming them in the evening, but it was worth it for them. So what he did is he designed this convoluted shape on this rotor that cuts the height to width ratio down, and what it does is it actually helps distribute the heat equally through the rotor, keeping it flat when it gets heat soaked. So it's not dissipating better, it's distributing better. So it's keeping a steel thin plate rotor flat as it's seeing a whole bunch of temperature. And so we brought that to the sprint car world along with our patented caliper design. And then from there went into all different forms of circle track, dirt circle track, asphalt circle track, road racing, and then we've always had a presence in the drag racing world. But about 5 or 6 years ago, we were like, hey, let's here's a market that could use some help in the braking industry, and we kind of have been tapping into it.
Definitely changed the game. Bringing something lightweight, strong, durable, and just an overall amazing product, and it's definitely showing. I mean, you guys are growing, being huge.
Go to a racetrack, it's cool to see all.
Yeah, you see the baddest of the bad have TBM brakes on them.
100%.
Got El Toro sitting in here. I don't know if it's broken or not, but fresh off Rocky Mountain Race Week. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for our tour of TBM Brakes. Thank you to Jason for showing us around a little bit.
No problem.
We're going to head back to the shop, get these brakes assembled, kind of fit stuff up on the car, and show you guys some of the other stuff that we got. All right, guys, I've made it back to the shop. So we got a delivery of some parts. We got some more stuff coming down, but TBM Brakes, I had to run down and get some hardware for them. And we also got our Menster shocks on it. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to assemble a spindle mount wheel with the TBM brakes, give you a little how-to on that. Just because I was looking at the instructions, there's not a lot of info out there, so we'll just go over how that's done. And I assume most of you guys that have spindle mount wheels kind of already know how to do it, but we'll show you anyhow. But before we get started doing that, I'll give you a little bit of an update on old Moonshine here. So the rear housing from Tin Soldiers is shipped. They got it on a pallet strapped down. I'll drop a picture in the video. TJ has been working on it. I don't remember exactly where we left off at, but transmission crossmember done. Most of the floor stuff is done underneath. So all the floor bracing is welded in, set up. I think he's got just the 2 upper bars and maybe 1 diagonal bar on that side. And then the X in the middle. And the chassis work will finally be done. And we can move on to other stuff. So super excited about that. I did get the motor, the front motor plate set. So this is where it needs to be. I just got to go ahead and do some stuff on the mid plate and get that situated. probably take the mounts that were on there off, and then me and TJ can come up with a new one to better suit where it's at now. The other thing I can do is I can take this back off. We got miles of clearance under there, so we should be good. And the oil pan does not hang lower than the frame rail, so that is always good. So if I do a big wheelie, it's not going to come down, smash the pan, and it looks like we got enough room. We can put like an oil retention device under there. The other thing we did is cut up and fit some new upper control arms for the car because they are a little bit longer than they used to be. So they'll go boop, boop, right there. But they are just a tickle longer, so we did have to make it. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to assemble TBMs for my specific application. So we've got TBM, I think it's 0010204 for TRZ spindle mount brakes. So we got TRZ 1.5" drop spindle and the TBM brakes. So first things first, you gotta start with the rotor. So go ahead and show you that. Very simple. Set the rotor on a hat. Get your bolts that come with it, supply in the kit, a little bit of Loctite, put those in. Alright, so rotor and hat are put together. So one thing you want to do before you put these on the car is actually scuff this up with some like 80 grit sandpaper, and then you can put that on. But for demonstration purposes, we're going to skip that part. So rotor's put together. So we're going to move on to our spindle and our caliper bracket right here. Alright guys, next step, bolt the rotor to the wheel. So this particular wheel is RC Comp, actually uses a fine thread. I know some of the other kits come with like a 12-point coarse thread, but those do not work for these. So put you a little Loctite on here, get that on bolted in. Alright, once you get your rotor bolted all on there, torque down, just flip her on up. Make sure your bearing's in the back and your seal is in. This is just for mock-up purposes, so I don't have my seal in there, so we can get the bearing back out here in a little bit and pack it. That put on, castle nut on, and get everything tightened down. I just like to take all the play out of it and I'll have like a little bit of drag. Feels pretty good. We'll just leave it like that for now. Alright, so the next step is actually bolting the caliper on. But one thing that you're going to have to do is kind of shim your caliper to get it to sit and center where you want it on the rotor. I've already done one of these, so I know exactly how many spacer washers I need. So I'll go ahead and put that on. The other thing that I had to do using those caliper bolts, I don't know what I did with, I use a lock washer on it just to take some length out of it because it was actually touching the rotor. So we'll go ahead and put that on. Alright, so I'm actually using 2 of the thick washers and 1 of the medium washers. There was 3 different sizes. So put that in there. In the game. Alright guys, once you got your caliper bolted on with the correct spacing, everything's centered, you can go ahead and just take off this little screw right here for your pad retaining clip. Just slide right out of there. Alright, once you've got your clip out, you and pretty easily just slide your pads in, line them back up to the holes, and then you just slide your clip right back in, just like that. Take your Allen, tighten it back down. It pretty much sums up installing TBM spindle mounts. So, not very difficult, but getting everything lined up, make sure everything's right, you'll be good to go. Let's go over the shocks a little bit that we're putting on Moonshine. These are Mensker Motorsports. These are a 4-inch stroke front shock. We've got a 350-pound 10-inch front spring on that. That should help because we're trying to get the car down a little bit before. We were like 2850 with me in it. We're trying to be down closer to 2550. But that was a 4-inch stroke, also AFCO shock with a 500-pound 8-inch spring, I think. So this is about the same, just nicer product. Valve for what we're going to do. On the back, however, we went ahead and moved up to a 7-inch stroke canister shock with a 60-pound 14-inch spring. So you can see it's real thin, but it should work really, really well on the back of the car. Sometimes it gets tricky on some other tracks that aren't as good, and you can play with the air pressure and stuff like that to get the car to do what you want it to do. So Elko, also on Cleve's channel, has these on it. Pretty much anything fast, you'll find something similar to this on it. The other thing I went ahead and did was pick up one of their shock refill kits. So we can actually check pressure at the track and kind of set it up to where we need it. I also got one of their gauges so that we can actually hook up to the canister without losing any air and check and fine dial in our rear suspension and our shock tune-up. So one of the things I've been wishing we had messing with mullet, but now we got it. So we'll have the new housing probably, I'd say, first of next week, and we can start buttoning everything up. We got a few more things we got to do. Chassis side, getting the motor mid-plate and all that other stuff done, and then we can take everything out of the car, scrub it down, paint it, get the chassis painted, and coat all that stuff, and then we can work on mounting and getting some of this stuff set up. Probably after we put quarter panels on the roof back on. Alright guys, I'm going to go ahead and let the cat out of the bag on what we're actually trying to do with Moonshine is run X275. So I went ahead and ordered an FIS GT55 80mm, one of their brand new turbos that has already been really fast. So we are going to be doing a single turbo on it, and I went ahead and picked this up. So we're going to do a dual exhaust on it, and this will just make it a lot easier for TJ to fabricate everything, kind of cut some time down on him because he's got a lot on his plate. He's done pretty much everything on this car so far. It's just out of my wheelhouse. Once he's done doing what he's got to do, I can get in the wire, pull him, and do all that kind of stuff that I actually know how to do. But yeah, we're not going to run bullhorns on it, but we'll probably have some just kick-ups on it. But it should sound pretty cool. Alright guys, pretty much sums it up for this episode. We have restocked all our merch. I'm not wearing any, I thought I was, but we restocked all the merch. So head on over to CletusMcFarland.com, pick you up a t-shirt. We do have a couple new ones coming out, a couple new ones on the site, so go over, check those out. But that's going to be it. I appreciate you guys watching. As always, stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next episode.